So if you've been following our last videos, we're now at the point where Steve and I have finally gotten the boathouse up, and we're getting closer and closer to being able to work on building Arabella. The problem though, and this came up at the end of the last video, the building inspector showed up at the house and ended up asking us some questions about the building, and come to find out we had to take the building down.
Initially, he was saying that the building was just a no-go. We couldn't do it. We couldn't have it. This wasn't going to work. And we just kind of like kept hammering him. We're like, well, what about this? And what about this? And what about this? And so his issue seemed to be the walls. And if it was just a cable strung between trees with a plastic roof over the top, there's no rules about tarping things, but there are rules about walls.
Do you think we have a chance of keeping the walls up?
Probably not. But
Tie it up as staging then.
you can try. See what he says tomorrow.
What's our plan if he says take him down?
Take him down. We'll take him down and put some lightweight, like 2x4 headers up and tie him off with ropes like he was saying. And then bust our humps and try to get the mold stood up ASAP. And then we can put up scaffolding and staging around the molds and attach the roof to those. As far as we can understand, there's no rules against tarping staging. But there are rules about putting up walls. So, we'll see what he says. But logistically, that's a real nightmare. So then we started talking about how we were going to have to build scaffolding and staging, and where do we draw the line between building staging around the boat and then putting a tarping over the staging, and the staging basically being walls. Like, because there's no real black and white here. There's no code for temporary plastic structure to build a boat in. So he was kind of willing to meet us halfway, and the biggest issue is getting it out of the variance, out of the zoning issue. So we had to get farther away from the road. And as long as we got farther away from the road and got a site plan and got some building permits and went through the proper channels, he seemed willing to issue us a permit.
Yeah, that took a while to do though, right?
Yeah, it was a little over a 2-week process and a lot of running around. We had to go to the Conservation Commission and make sure we weren't near any wetlands or that was going to be a problem. And we had to get a site plan done and draw up building plans, and
It's kind of an awkward time.
all that took time.
Running around in the middle of that, still working on the project.
Yeah, and trying to figure out what to do to keep moving forward, but to not create more work for ourselves, because we weren't sure if the building was going to stay where it was, or if the building was going to move, or how that was all going to play out. So before the building inspector showed up, we were all ready to start laying out the lofting floor. And then, with having to move the building, it kind of didn't make sense to build a lofting floor anymore, but there were a few parts of it that we could make. So we did what we could. Yeah, the lofting floor is just a big, smooth, flat floor that we can draw the boat full size on. So we took, they were 16 or 20 foot 2x4s and some plywood gussets to make the full 40-foot run for the lofting floor to build the boat on. So we got the windows made and did a little figuring about how we were going to lay it out. Got some of the plywood panels painted, but it was all just kind of prep work, waiting until we got the permits and the okay and got the building moved. Okay.
What are you thinking?
I think now it gets fiddly and I need your help.
Alright.
So we'll get some blocking under this end and get things like sort of roughly leveled. We'll screw this end together, put it on the middle brace, go down, do the same thing on the other end, and then we'll have to just join those couple seams that aren't done up yet. And then we'll put our cross braces down it. And put the plywood decking on, paint it, let it dry for, I don't know, like a week in this humidity. And then we can start lofting, which is very exciting. That's the actual first step of building the boat. Up until this point, it's all been prep. As soon as we lay out the plans and start drawing on that big flat board, we'll be ready. The rooster's excited too. He's crowing his enthusiasm.
As you can see, we were really excited to start working on the lofting floor. That was going to be the first part to building the boat, and so we would actually be doing work on the boat. This was very exciting for us. So we decided to move on with building the lofting floor. In order to build the lofting floor, though, we needed to have it level so it could come together properly. As we worked on it, though, we realized that it was probably not going to make much sense to level the floor out in the building that we were just going to move.
We have to take this apart and go through it all again. If we're here, we can just grab the parts and move them somewhere else. But if we go through all the work of leveling it, it's going to suck to have to take it all apart.
Yeah. So, talk to him tomorrow.
Yeah, I can see him first thing in the morning, hopefully. I mean, this is a good jump start towards getting the lofting floor done. I mean, leveling it out, putting in the cross bracings, it's not going to take too long.
No, I mean, we got the bits and pieces together, so.
Yeah. And then once the 2x4s are all laid out, it's just slamming in pieces of plywood. That's going to go wicked fast. 10 minutes, we'll have the deck laid out on it.
Mm-hmm.
We weren't discouraged, though. There was still some work to be done. So we decided that painting the panels was probably a good thing to get out of the way.
Your weapon, sir? Yeah, so the end result was we spun the building 90 degrees. So initially, if the road was like this, the building was here, and then we just spun the building and put it here. And that got us well away from the setback, which made the building inspector happy. And we got the plans drawn up, we got the site plan done, we got the okay from the Conservation Commission, and crossed all the T's, dotted all the I's, paid our dues, and got our building permit. So where the building initially was, we had cut all the uprights to match the ground. So the headers would all be at the same height no matter what craziness the ground did underneath it. And then when we talk about moving the building, that ground is in a different crazy pattern. So those posts no longer work. So that was a bit of a nightmare going through and trying to figure out if the posts could stay where they were and if we could kind of jack some up and cut some off and how that would end up landing. And then there was also a bunch of tree work to do because where it was going to get spun, there's a bunch of big maple trees and they hadn't been pruned in forever. So their branches hung really low and they would have been in the boathouse and hitting the plastic. So it was a lot of work to take the building down and then spin it and then figure out adjusting the heights of the posts and doing all the tree work. Time to go climb a tree.
Do you want to talk a little bit more about the tree work? What exactly did we have to do?
Basically we call it crown raising. So we just prune the lower branches off the tree. So to do that, we put a ladder up to get to the branches, and then I just carefully monkeyed up higher into the tree, and then fixed a rope and attached it to myself with some climbing gear, and then that let me work up and down the tree just by hanging off the rope. And then got out the chainsaw and very carefully gave the tree a haircut. Alright, if you want, you can get me the chainsaw and you can get that ladder out of there and we'll start pruning.
Alright, so all this that we took off is going to get used for firewood and then cleaned up.
Yeah, so we're going to knock it all into manageable sized pieces, pile it off to the side, and then my grandparents are going to pick through it and take the bigger stuff for firewood and take the smaller stuff and go dump it up in the woods and let it rot down and return to nature.
Cool,
It
cool.
was good. That tree needed a haircut anyways. So we had to level the post for the building. So the first step in that was striking a baseline. So I used a string and a string level and just made one straight string and made 3 more until we connected it into a square or a rectangle, and then everything was level. And then from there we could measure from the string up however high we wanted to go, which for us was 12 feet, I think, was our tallest post. So that gave us an idea of how high we could go. So if our tallest post was 12 feet and the string at the lowest point for the ground was 2 feet up, that means that our shorter posts where the string is at 0 and the ground would be 10 feet, if that makes any sense. But we use that baseline and then measure below it to figure out how much we need to add or subtract to the posts
To keep the topsoil
to keep the topsoil level. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that gave us more trouble than we thought.
Yeah, a little bit. It was kind of a pain. We're going to get the 50-foot steel tape. We're going to run it underneath this string, and then at every 10 feet is going to be a post. And we'll measure from the ground to the string, and that'll give us a baseline, and then we can figure out how tall we need to make all the posts.
Cool.
Twelve inches off a baseline. I feel like I did this for that structure that's right there.
Measuring for the posts so that they could be moved and be at the right height where their new location was going to be was more tedious than we expected. We wrote all the measurements down on a notebook, and we figured out what needed to be cut off the original post or what needed to be added onto the original post.
That's gonna get hacked down to 2 feet.
So we did some figuring, and then we marked all the posts and decided whether we needed to cut some off or if we needed to find some way to lengthen them, which is never easy.
Okay, is 11.4.
Yeah, keep dreaming. That one's way off.
By how much?
What did you say it was?
11.4.
Six inches?
Oof.
Well, we'll just block it up to 6 inches. There's not much we're gonna do.
Yeah.
So. We had the length originally, but trying to spin the building and not wanting to undo everything and re-drill it and re-bolt it, it's kind of what's gonna happen.
Yeah.
Not ideal, but we need to comply. We need to follow the rules. So we move it.
With all that being done, the building was now ready to come down. So there were a couple things that we needed to take care of before we did that. We still had some tools and things underneath the building, so we had to clean it out. And the biggest thing we needed to get out of there was our gigantic table saw, which we just got. So instead of manhandling it, the two of us, it's pretty heavy, we decided we were going to build a sled, and we dragged it out of the boathouse with a car.
Good?
All right. Hold up.
That was easier than carrying it.
So we initially thought that it was going to be much easier to move than it really was. I mean, it wasn't as easy as just a spin.
No, it wasn't easy as a spin.
So in order to move the building, Steve and I took it apart in what we called bays. So a 10-foot run would be like a bay. So there would be like 2 posts or 3 posts in the case of the ends, and we basically just unhooked them from each other. Once those were undone, we basically just moved them over bay by bay over to the area where it was going to go back up.
How to pull out stakes the fun way.
I don't know about fun. We might have different definitions of fun.
There you go, ahead.
Alright, so we loosened it.
Alright.
Can you put some more blocking in?
A little higher.
Alright,
That's about right.
cool. Let me just pick the whole shebang up.
There she goes.
Cool.
Go ahead.
So do you think we should join a gym? I mean, I'm kind of worried we're not getting enough weightlifting in with this project. That, I don't know. What do you think? Planet Fitness or one of those things? Is it necessary?
The first section was the end closest to the anchor tree that we were using. So we just put a rope up in the tree and just used that to help us to spin it around. The problem then was actually standing it up. So Steve and I spent a little bit of time trying to haul the top of it up so that we could get it stood up. And as you can see, it was a little bit of a difficult task. That section happened to be much heavier than we are, so hauling that up into a tree was not the easiest task. Once that bay was up, we basically just started piecing the building together. So we started at the sections in the middle where we had braces coming out. We had reinforced the middle of the building with cross braces, diagonal braces down to the ground. So those would give us some feet for them to stand up straight. So we started with the farther one, and then what we did is just piece the building back together, kind of like a jigsaw. And we just worked all the way around the building. All that work and we still weren't done. We still needed to get the roof on. So we looked at the trees in order to hook up the cable, and turns out they were not strong enough. So in the next episode, check it out, we get a mast for the boathouse. Trust me, you do not want to miss the next episode.